Okay, welcome to the first substantive section of this course. And in this lecture, I'm going to talk about the difference between copy editing and content editing. Now let's begin with content editing. Content editing has to do with reviewing a manuscript for its structure and its storytelling capability. So you're looking at how strong are the characters, can the story be improved by maybe rearranging sections or whatever. Content editing can be found primarily through readers groups and so on, or not writers groups. So if you have a group that gets together and so on, and you look at each other's work, you're primarily doing content editing. You're commenting on how strong is this story and how can it be improved. Now, on the other hand, there's copy editing. Copy editing has to do with finding grammar, spelling, and syntax errors. So these are actual flaws in English that are in your manuscript, and they get found a completely different way. Now, if you're looking for content editing, you need to look somewhere else, like a writer's group or somewhere else. Then you need to look somewhere else like a writer's group. If you're looking for copy editing, then you've come to the right place, because that's what this course is about, how to find grammar and spelling and syntax errors, basically errors in English in your manuscript. That's what this course is about. You need to go somewhere else if you want content editing. Now let me tell you a little something about content editing. Another way to get it is to go with a professional publisher, maybe one of the New York publishers. So if you submit your work through an agent and through an editor at a large publishing company, you will receive content editing. Now you hear stories of content editing nightmares, like editing by committee, where they'll take your book into a room with several editors and everybody will redesign your book based on a committee. This is a horrible thing to have happen, and I've heard of it happening to writers. I've heard, too, of editors at companies doing content editing and saying, well, you know, your book is about witches, but werewolves are big right now, so go rewrite your book and make it a werewolf story instead. So to me, content editing is not helpful. I do not want it. The story is going to be what it's going to be, and I don't care about somebody else's idea of what's marketable or what's going to sell. I want my story to be left alone. However, as I've already pointed out, if you don't want bad reviews, then the English in your book has to be correct. So you have to copy edit your work. Again, this is a course about copy editing, finding errors in English in your manuscript, and not content editing, deciding whether your story is marketable and whether it needs to be rearranged, whether you need to have a stronger opening, whether your heroes are weak or strong. That's content editing, and you can get that through writers groups, and you are going to get it from your editor if you go with a professional editing company. So, in the next lecture, we're going to talk more about copy editing. I believe we're going to talk about the cost of not copy editing, and I'll see you in that lecture. In this lecture, I'm going to talk with you about the cost of not copy editing, and I'm going to tell you the story of Moving Violation. Moving Violation is an early book that my wife wrote, and I did some writing with her and some outlining and plotting and stuff like that to help her get this book out. I also published it. But the point is that we were very naive and didn't know what we were doing when we first started self-publishing. So we released Moving Violation without any professional or copy editing from outside, just the two of us. We tried to do the copy editing ourselves, and we did it without any tools and without any real process. That's what you're going to find in this course, is process and tools that will actually produce good copy editing. We're also going to draft external people to get as many eyes on the manuscript as possible. Now, if you look at this book, it has 85 reviews, but it only has 4 stars. And one of the reasons is it's actually up now since we copy edited it, but it used to be like a 3.5-star book. It wasn't doing very well because of all of the English grammatical and spelling errors that were in the book. Now, what ultimately happened is that one of our readers took pity on us and offered to start copy editing our books. And then we paid that reader ultimately to start doing it, and eventually moved on to a professional copy editor, which was quite expensive, which we're going to talk about in the next lecture. But in the meantime, we took the hits of bad reviews, and our sales suffered. Now, yes, our sales suffered, but this particular book ended up making somewhere around, let me see, its best month, it made $8,500 in 1 month. So if you get your act together and get your work copy edited and get it out there and don't have all the errors distracting your readers, you can actually make a lot of money off of a book on Amazon. So I'm giving you no choice. If you are going to follow my courses and so on, my techniques and my advice to write books and self-publish them on Amazon, which I recommend, you must copy edit them. Now, I used to say you must seek out professional copy editing services until I put together the techniques that are outlined in this course. And they're quite simple. They're not complex and they're not expensive. And it'll save you a lot of money. But you must copy edit your work. You must remove the English grammar, spelling, and syntax errors so that you don't distract your readers. They'll just stop reading and then they'll give you a bad review and they won't buy any more of your books. You can see that this book is one of a series of 22 books. So if you hook them with the first book, you've got 21 more books of sales. Don't blow it by not copy editing your work. Have I said that enough? You will copy edit, and I'll show you in this course how to do it. So that's the cost of not copy editing. In the next lecture, I'm going to talk about the cost of professional copy editing. I'll see you there. In this lecture, I want to talk with you about the cost of professional copy editing. Now, as I said earlier, when we first published our books, we didn't have any copy editing at all. And then a reader did some copy editing for me, and then we hired that reader, and then we finally hired professional copy editors. And I was convinced at that point that what you need to release a book is professional copy editing. And that's a great idea to have somebody else copy edit your book. The problem is that they charge $300 to $500. Actually, I've seen more like $800 to copy edit an 8,000 word book. Now, the 300 is going to be shorter, but $800 to copy an 8,000 or an 80,000 word book. So a standard length book. That's a lot of money to have to recoup if you're just beginning to get into self-publishing. So professional copy editing services are expensive. So one of the things that this course is going to do is if you've got a manuscript and it's near completion or it's just started, you can actually start editing before it's completed, which is something you really can't do with a professional copy editor, is that I'm going to save you that $800. There you go. And I'll give you my mailing address so that you can mail me the $800. No, of course I won't do that. But for the price of this course, I'm going to save you $800 on editing an 80,000 word book. I'm going to show you how to do it yourself. And that's what the next section of this course is all about, is do it yourself copy editing. I'm going to give you a process, I'm going to give you tools, and I'm going to point you to external help that by the time you take advantage of all these steps, you are going to have a perfectly clean manuscript ready for publication without getting bad reviews because of bad English. So I'll see you in the next section. Now, I brought up a document. It's a short story that I wrote once upon a time called Death Sentence. And I'm going to use it as the basis for my demonstrating my editing process. Now, the first thing I want to talk with you about is how and when to edit. One of the concepts, the traditional concept of how to edit, is called the waterfall model. And the reason that it's called that is that you go from one step and then you fall down to the next and you fall down to the next, and you do them in order. And those steps are to write the first draft, then go and edit the entire story, and come back with your second draft, and then go and edit again, and you come out with your third draft. So what the point is that you don't start editing until you're finished writing the first draft. Now, this is supposed to be faster because during the writing process, all you're doing is core dumping the story. You're dumping it as fast and writing it as fast as you possibly can. You're not stopping to edit or do any other distractions. The other option that you've got is to do what's called the spiral method of editing. And that's actually outlining, writing, and editing. What you do is you go in a spiral. So I'm going to outline, and I'm going to come out with a bit of an outline, and then I'm going to start to write. And then when I get tired of writing, I'm going to go edit what I wrote. And then I'm going to go, let's tweak the outline a little bit. Okay, now let's write some more, and then let's go edit. And you just keep spiraling through this. By the time you're done with your first draft, or by the time I'm done with my first draft, I actually have a pretty solid draft because I've been editing all along. Now, the argument against the spiral model is that it slows you down. If you just focus on nothing but writing as fast as possible, you can get down the manuscript much faster than if you break for editing along the way. My argument is that I get tired of writing after a while, and I want to take a break. So I go and I edit for a while. Other writers have commented that what they like to do is start their writing day by editing what they wrote the previous day. Now, I guess it's kind of a mini waterfall method. You could look at the spiral as being a tight mini waterfall method where you write part of your document and then you edit it. But so some people like to edit their work to start their day. Some people, like me, they just get tired of editing or writing and they go, I'm just going to edit what I just wrote. So that's your choice. Those are your choices. You can either write your entire first manuscript in one big blast, and that will allow you to write the manuscript faster, and then edit it into the second draft, and then edit it into the third draft, and just go waterfall style like that. Or you can spiral. You can take times going back and forth between your outline, writing, and editing. I prefer the spiral method. A lot of professional writers recommend the waterfall method. So it's going to be your choice as to how frequently you're going and editing. And with that said, let's look at the first step in the self-editing process. I'll see you in the next lecture. The next technique that I want to talk about as far as editing is using software to do some of the editing for you. Now, I've been using Word, Microsoft Word 2016 to write this document. And if I scroll up just a little bit further, look at this. What is this blue line under future? And what is this dash line here? What's being done here? Well, what it is it's Word finding grammar and spelling errors for you. So I can go to this word and click on it, and then I can right-click, and what it does is it says, wait a second. This is a grammar error, and double-check whether a comma is needed here. So it's recommending a comma. So I would read this and I go, if this nation or our people are to have any future, yeah, I would put a comma here. It's right. So I'd go, comma. So that's how Word can actually check things for you. If you see red squiggles, let's make a red squiggle here. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, come on. Okay, I made it capital, so it didn't. There we go. What that means is that this is a misspelled word. And what you do is you click on it and then you right click and it comes up with suggestions. It has no suggestions for spelling of this goofy word. But what if I did something like spelling and I forgot the L? Then it becomes red underlined and I go to it and up comes spelling and spieling and spilling as alternatives, and I just click on it and it changes it. Now that's pretty cool, but what I really want to talk with you about is an even cooler product called Grammarly. Now I had need to step in at this point and to record an addendum to this little video because two things have changed. One, the way that Grammarly runs, which is the main automated tool that I'm going to show you how to use to find spelling, grammar, usage, and style errors in your document. And the other is the order in which I do things. Now, typically, I would say go ahead and manually copy edit and then run Grammarly. But in reality, that doesn't make sense. You want to run Grammarly first to catch most of the errors, and then do the manual grunt work just to find the stuff that Grammarly misses. Now, what does Grammarly miss? If it gets spelling, grammar, usage, and style errors, it misses things like the rock threw a rock. Grammarly doesn't know that a rock can't throw things, so you need to read manually for things that Grammarly can't find. Otherwise, you don't need to look for spelling, grammar, style, and usage errors because Grammarly is going to find all those. Now, I also run ProWritingAid. So the Windows finding errors that I talked about is applicable, but now we're going to talk about using more sophisticated grammar checkers, Grammarly and ProWritingAid. Now, I'm going to skip ProWritingAid for now. It's just another grammar checker. But here you can see Grammarly has been floating around in this document, and it's found 69 errors. This is the little Grammarly thing. Now, when I scroll over it, it increases in size, and I can grab it and move it around. But otherwise, it floats around, and it floats everywhere. What it used to be is that you installed Grammarly in Word, like I've installed ProWritingAid in Word. Now you install Grammarly on your operating system, and it runs everywhere. It runs in your email. It runs in your WordPress as you're writing documents in that. It runs in Word, in PowerPoint as you're writing things. It checks for errors in your PowerPoint slides. So it runs everywhere, which is really very cool. Now, the first thing that I want to do is I want to jump over to my browser and show you how to find Grammarly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a new window or a new tab, and I'm going to go to Grammarly.com. Grammarly is grammar with L-Y on the end of it. So Grammarly.com. And when we go here, it gives us the option signing up is free. Now, it is free, but it also has a cost. If you get the free version, you get all of this stuff. If you get the Pro version for $12 a month, then you get all kinds of cool stuff. Now, I'm running the Pro version currently, but the free version will check and find a lot of stuff for you. It's really worth getting the free version of Grammarly and installing it. So you go and create an account, and you download and install the Grammarly. Let me show you what you want to install. Let's go to Product. And what you want is you want the desktop version. Also, you can run it on your mobile, or you can run it in your browser. Now, I find that I'm running it on my desktop. It also covers my browser, so I don't need the browser version. So I would go to the desktop version, and I would get Grammarly. And it has you sign up and do some stuff. You have to have an account and things like that. And then you download Grammarly and you install it. It's a standard Windows install. I would imagine it's a standard portable or device install too. Now, once you install it, what's going to happen is that Grammarly is going to float around all over the place. As I said, when I'm in Word here, here's Grammarly popping up in Word and telling me that I have 63 errors. So you can look at the individual errors, but what I like to do is I like to scroll through the document. And what will happen is these little errors will pop up, like this one, currently. So here's a Grammarly error. They were currently sorting through. So they were sorting through the basement. If I want this, I click on the replacement and it replaces it. I can undo that. Then let's go over it. The other thing that I can do is I can dismiss it. So what you want to do is with all 63 of these errors, you want to either accept it or dismiss it or write your own, rewrite the thing the way that you want it. I'm going to accept this. Then you go to the next one, bellowed. Now, this is actually a ProWritingAid error. It's hard to distinguish them at times. So we're going to ignore this. And then he decided to play. This is a ProWritingAid error. We're going to ignore that. So it's a little confusing. Let's see if we can get rid of this and maybe a lot of the ProWritingAid errors will go away. Here, now we're just getting Grammarly errors since I closed ProWritingAid. Now what I end up doing is I use all three. I use Windows, ProWritingAid, and Grammarly to go through and check all these errors, and you either accept or dismiss. Next one, take a look. This is actually a Windows error where it's saying not take a look, just use look. So with Windows, I can accept or reject those. Coming down. Okay, here's the next error. Full. Now this is green. The colors mean different things. Let's see, what do they mean? They show you here the colors. The green means engagement, the blue means clarity, the red is correctness, and the purple is delivery. So as you go through and you get the different colors, still, okay, it says that there should be a comma afterwards, and maybe I accept that. So what you do with Grammarly is you go through, either accept or reject every one of the errors until you get no errors found. And then what you are is you're clean as far as spelling, grammar, style, and usage errors. The only thing that I say you need to look for manually after that is things that just don't make sense, like the rock through a rock. Sally had a leg growing out of her head. Stuff like that, stuff that just doesn't make sense. It's grammatically spelling usage correct, so Grammarly won't find it, but it's still an error. So let's imagine that I'm beginning to edit this manuscript. Either using the spiral or the waterfall method, it doesn't matter. So you pick your method and the rest of these techniques are going to work in either case. So let's say I'm editing this and I go, okay, death sentence. And Robert Buchanan sat in a wooden chair with his back to the cold cinder wall, waiting for his end. What is the, oh wow, waiting for his end? He knew his end would, and the problem is with this editing method, I'm getting involved in the story. So I'm kind of slipping into content editing. I don't want to get involved in the story. I want to get involved in the words, in the grammar, the spelling, and the syntax. I want this to be correct English. I'm not interested in the story. I just want the words to be right. And the first technique that you're going to use to do that is not start at the beginning. Instead, you'll scroll down to the end of whatever chunk you're editing. So if you're spiral editing, it's going to be a chunk of the story. If you're waterfall editing, then it's going to be all the way down to the end. And what I do is I take maybe a paragraph or two at a time. So I go, as his military messengers wheeled from the room to carry out the final order, he found himself pondering. So this is how the world ends, not with a whimper, but a bang. So I'm going to start editing backward so that I don't get involved in the story. And then I'll go, okay, implement all countermeasures. Yeah, that's correct. Take all defensive and offensive measures available. Launch everything. Robert responded wearily. Now, actually, this should be a comma, shouldn't it? Because it's the continuation of the sentence. So let's make that a comma. So that's one error that I found. And then I go back again. Robert knew all All of this based on weeks of briefings and discussions of worst case scenarios. Okay, that looks good. Worst case, all that this is looking fine. So I go back another paragraph and I just keep editing backward so that I don't get involved in the story and I stay focused on the words and the correct English of my manuscript. So that's the first trick to copy editing your work. Don't get yourself caught up in content editing by reading from the top down. Instead, go to the end of the chunk you're going to be reading. It could be the entire document or a chunk of a spiral editing session and start going backwards doing your copy editing. So that's step number 1. In the next lecture, we're going to look at step number 2. I'll see you there. Okay, the second technique that you're going to use to self-copy edit your manuscript is that you're going to read out loud. Have you ever noticed that you think that you copy edit a work and then you go to somebody like my wife, in my case, and you say, hey, I'd like to read you something. And you start reading it out loud and you find all of these errors? For some reason, reading things out loud finds more errors than just reading them in your head the way you would normally read. It gets you to articulate the messages and to make sure that the sentences are actually, that they're smooth and that they're what you want. So I always read my work out loud. I do exactly what I've been showing you so far. So I'd begin at the end and I'd go backwards, a paragraph or two at a time, and I'd say, as his military messengers wheeled from the room to carry out his final order, he found himself pondering. So this is how the world ends, not with a whimper, but a bang. I'd read it out loud, and I will find a great deal more errors by reading out loud than I will by reading to myself internally in my brain. As Robert remained stunned by the announcement he had been awaiting all morning, his messenger felt compelled to include, as we discussed earlier, sir, this is a total response, the ultimate response, but it is our only hope for rebuilding a future from the pieces that survive. So I read it out loud and I go, yeah, that worked pretty well. You know, I'm not finding a lot of errors. I hope I find some later so that I can give you an example of some errors. But so that's step number 2. What you're going to do to self-edit your work is you're going to edit it backward and you're going to read out loud. And with those 2 steps in place, we're going to move on to the next step. I'll see you in the next lecture. Okay, the final step in the self-editing process is actually not self-editing. It's drafting other people you know to read your manuscript for you. Now, you can draft people to do content editing if you want, but enforce the fact or stress the fact that you want copy editing done. So look for English errors, look for awkward English, look for ways to rephrase things, look for repeated words. All of these things that are bad English, have them definitely look for. If you want them to do content editing as well, that's fine. So if you have a mom that used to be an English teacher, that is perfect. I can't tell you how many students I have that say, oh yeah, my aunt, she used to be an English teacher. She's a great resource. Use those sources. Get your manuscript in front of the eyes of as many individuals as you can, and you'll find even more errors. Now that's the complete self-editing process. So I'm going to go to I'm going to either spiral or waterfall edit. I prefer spiral. And I'm going to start at the back and read and edit backward. I'm going to read out loud. I'm going to install and run Grammarly in Word. And I'm going to have others take a look at my manuscript and look for errors for me. If you do all of those things, you will have skipped the $800 of hiring a professional copy editor, and you will have a pristine, clean manuscript. And that's it for the course.